Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's version of the Pau Hana Talks, here brought to you by the Hawaiʻi State Art Museum. My name is Eric. I'll be your host today. We have a welcomed opportunity and an amazing chance to talk to two people who deal with probably one of the most ubiquitous artistic activities across the globe. Statistics show that about 95 million photos and videos were uploaded to Instagram last year. To give you some perspective, the population of Germany in the same year was 83 million. Photography, whether it be in still pictures or even motion pictures, captures our attention as a species. There is nothing more that we enjoy than capturing a memory, capturing a moment in time, capturing that thing that makes us human. And yet the photograph never ever truly captures it. As soon as we catch it in that frame, it goes away. And somehow the photograph ends up being right in between the experience and the reality of our human experience. It continues to boggle all of us how we can do better photography, how we can communicate more effectively. And that's just in a very simple point shoot style. Photography is so much more. Photography can infuriate us, it can trick us, it can be designed to communicate messaging that makes us feel compelled to action to change the world. It can also trick us into thinking and believing things that aren't real are. That is the power of a photograph. And these two guests provide me the opportunity to discuss not only the challenges to pursue that as an art form, but also to pursue that as educators and as continuous students in the process of photography. Kelly Ciurej and Atis Puampai are both educators, photographers, Hawaii residents that are consistently and always wrestling with that challenge of taking the best photograph and finding that moment that expresses the memory, the emotion, and the impact of us as humans. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Ciurej and Atis Puampai, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, how's it going? Quick message. Kelly has to restart her Zoom.
It's all good.
Okay. She just texted me and she
No,
told me to send it
don't
to
even panic. It wouldn't be computers. It wouldn't be technology. That's how it goes. So Kelly Ciurej will be with us very, very shortly. With that being said, as Kelly's going to join us, I guess to remain flexible, let's go ahead. Atis, do you want to do your particular presentation? And then when Kelly hops on, we'll be able to show hers afterwards.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
So just jump right into it.
Might as well. Let's go ahead and do it, ladies and gentlemen. Atis Puampai.
All right, here we go. So before I start my presentation, I'm just gonna kind of give like the overall path, which is just how I started out taking photography, or how I picked it up, and then what it is to now. So I kind of wanted to show you like how everything kind of just came to be. Okay, it's kind of a long journey, so. Okay, good?
All good.
Okay, here we go. All right, play. Oh, I started, wait, sorry. Started right in the middle. I spoiled it. Okay, here we go. Good? We good? Seeing everything? Everything's good to go. Is it?
Yep.
You're on. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, cool. So you're seeing like the skate photo. So this is how I started out my photography career. Actually, I first started doing skateboard, inline skating, biking, photography. This is how I learned how to do like basic camera stuff, like shutter speed, aperture, how to learn how to do that, how to use a flash, but I was really interested in just capturing essentially just the person in motion, the trick or the action, everything like that. I only realized that like later on down the line, back then I was like, oh, it's trick. I'm a skater. I've been a skater since 1998. So that's always been in my blood. But, take a step back, I started to realize I'm really into just messing with time and the perspective of time, and how can you alter that perspective from our own experience. But yeah, because of the pandemic and all that, I actually started an Instagram for all my old photos called the Mānoa Rats Time Capsule. Um, Mānoa Rats are like our old skate crew in Pearl City, so it's a good documentation of all these crazy guys before they were adults, you know, just doing their thing. So that's there if you guys want to check it out. Yeah, my other Instagram is, you'll see later on. But yeah, going back to that whole, you know, capturing motion, alternate perspective of time. I was really into seeing like the people who originated doing that, like Doc Edgerton. You guys are familiar with Harold Edgerton. Yeah, he was the one that actually froze time to really small like moments, you know, such as like if you see here the bullet passing through an apple, and he uses like strobes to see sequential time, you know, within a single photograph, you know. And one thing too is, you know, going back to the whole skating photography, there's so much that goes beyond just a photograph, like setting up the tripods, the lights, everything, coordinating with the skater and my own like reflexes and my own, you know, my dexterity. I think that's equally as important as the final image. So I started to really think about that and started to really look at other people who kind of work in the same way. These two examples, like they're pretty old school, like Edward Muybridge, the father of movies. I don't know if anyone's familiar with, but he was the guy that, you know, photographed a horse in motion to see if all of the hooves like left the ground and all that. And I was really interested in how he came up with a way to do it, which is like he pretty much made tripwires for the horse to run across. And then all of a sudden, every time the horse like hit a tripwire, it would activate a guillotine shutter. And this is pretty much the first use of a shutter, or like the invention of a shutter. So I was really into dealing with that idea of like, how do you get a photographic result, and how do you make something to work to do that? Yeah, that's pretty much how my workflow is. Like, I have an idea of how to get to some place, but then how do you build something to do it, to achieve it, you know? Just a little background for me, I used to do robotics when I was in intermediate school, so I think that kind of helped with my journey, just to let you guys know. So the first time I've ever worked in this way was my discovery of what strip photography is, or slit scan photography. And what this is it's pretty much just a it's using motion of the film and only exposing the image in a narrow slit. So imagine how a scanner works. There's only like a pixel scanner and it goes, you know. So imagine that, but the scanner head does not move. It just stays still, but the exposed film moves behind it. So what happens with that is it only records things that passes past that line of exposure. So if you're looking right here, you're only seeing one spot being photographed, this one dimensional line, but anything that passes through that line will be rendered in focus, or you'll be able to see it. So this is called time displacement. So I'm just want to like clear that up. So usually in a photograph, the x-axis and the y-axis, they're both variations of space within an amount of time that's embedded within the image. But with time displacement, one of the axes are replaced with time. So you're just seeing the same singular dimension of space over a period of any given time. So what you're seeing is my girlfriend rotating in a single space. So what you're seeing, yeah, you're seeing pretty much her rotating, and as the scan head is scanning, it's being rolled out and shown through time. So you're seeing, if you think about it, all the way at the left of the image, this is probably the most earliest moment in the start of the image, and the very far right is the end of the image. This is, you know, variances of time within the single space. Does that make sense? Just to clarify. Okay, cool. All right, nice. So as you can tell, it's those that type of photography, like a normal camera can't do that. And then there are cameras that can do that called photo finish cameras. That's what they use to determine like winners of races. So I do not have $10,000 lying around. So I had to build it myself. So I just mess with like toy cameras, and you know, because they're expendable, they're made of plastic, I can easily break them apart, take them apart. And just knowing how like the camera works, which is just a lens, a housing, and a shutter, you know, just knowing the basic elements of the camera and how do you work around it to do exactly what you want it to do. I pretty much did that with the Holga because it's like the easiest thing to do it with. Um, at first, I did it without a motor, so I used like a tripod crank, like really caveman. I glued a tripod crank on. I put a slit behind the imaging plane, and yeah, use bulb exposure and just use that. But then I started to really get into it, and then you know, like Bob's Burgers, the thrill of the build, you know. So I started to build all these other things. I started actually hacking real legit cameras, just to get to know. Like this camera in particular took 2 months, you know, just to get it to work, and just to pretty much deconstruct it and reconstruct it all over again, you know, and to get it to do what exactly I wanted to do. So here are some examples of some images I've done with these cameras. 2014. This is I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 6th Avenue exit. Yeah, so I'm right on top of that bridge, looking straight down to the freeway, just photographing the single location, and then all the cars are just passing right where I'm photographing at. So this is called like a linear use of strip photography or slit scan photography. And then this is rotational. So again, my girlfriend, she slowly rotated while I was exposing the same point. So you're pretty much seeing, I used to call this face peeling because it looks like you peel the face off of them and it's laid flat. So you're seeing a 360 view of her in a 2-dimensional image, or it's laid flat. Okay, so this is I want to just show this quick video. This is when I went to Tokyo a couple years ago. This is me photographing the Shibuya crossing, using the entire roll of film to make this image. 30 seconds, just people crossing. And people looked at me weird because I just ran right in the center and just stood there and just exposed the entire roll of film. This is one entire roll of a medium format film shot. Yeah. So as you can tell, like I was really, I deviated away from like skate photography because skate's really, it's a real niche thing. Like not a lot of people are, like they know about it, you know, like what trick are they doing or whatever. So I was really interested in just showing the everyday life, like everyday like motions, and seeing how it looks from a different perspective. So when I went to grad school, I really tried to simplify it all the way down, like to the point where it's almost as universal as possible within our planet. So I focused literally on just the sun, the earth, and light itself. So my first body of work that I started with this mentality is called Earth at 970 miles per hour. So this goes on the idea that off of the Copernicus's idea where the sun revolved around the Earth. So I wanted to show how do you show that in still photography? Usually with like regular long exposure photographs of the sun, you see it streak across the sky, like in this image example, but you're seeing the perspective of the earth. You're not seeing it from a different perspective. So I want to see the sun staying still while the earth's spinning, or at least in motion. So I was figuring out how to do that. So what I did was I made a camera, of course. It's a pinhole camera. So what this crazy contraption you see here is essentially a pinhole camera, a rifle scope. I used to take air riflery in high school, so I had a scope lying around. And I also scavenged a broken SLR shutter from a camera, and I put it in front of the pinhole. Because if you think about it, even with the pinhole camera, it only takes like 5 seconds to correctly expose an image when you're facing directly at the sun. So I had to figure out, how do you show an hour's worth of the sun's movement, or in our case, the Earth's movement? How do you show that an hour's worth into from only 5 seconds. So with the shutter, I was able to subdivide. Is that loud one? No, I was able to subdivide it with the camera shutter. So like I would take 5 seconds and I would do like, I would take it and do like maybe like an eighth of a second and then wait a minute and then take another exposure and wait a minute. And then I'm using the scope to always aim at the sun. So I would aim it directly at the sun, take a picture, and then I would wait a minute and then I would look to see where the sun moved and I would re-aim my camera again and then take another picture. And I would do that as however many times I want. And what you see is pretty much a multi-exposure of images directly onto one piece of film. So what you're seeing here is, I believe it was 15 minutes worth of the sun's movement, of the Earth's movement. So you're seeing this blurred landscape, and what you're seeing is just essentially the motion blur of the Earth spinning while the sun stays still. And then let's see here, this is a video. So you're seeing pretty much one image that's not showing any Earth movement, and then you're seeing another image that has about 45 minutes worth of Earth movement. And this is shot like on my third floor of my apartment building. And then I recently, for my thesis, I went to Mauna Kea to do this, and I started to do exponential increases of Earth motion within each photograph. So for this one, there's no motion. This is just a straight up photograph of 7 seconds. And this one is, I think, 7 minutes or 1 minute. And then 7 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And then finally an hour right here. Yeah, this is an hour's worth of the Earth spinning on top of Mauna Kea. So I want to go back and show how it kind of looks like a time lapse. So this is me on top of Mauna Kea. This is an hour's worth of me photographing how I photographed the Earth's rotation while tracking the sun. Yeah, it was pretty funny. I was there for like a week, and the rangers there, they just started to, at first they were like, who is this guy? And then they just started to wave at me as time went by. So it was pretty fun. Yeah, so you get the idea. So that was Earth at 907 miles per hour. That's focusing on the sun and the Earth relationship. My next series was I wanted to dive even deeper and more singular to just light itself. So I started this project called Waves. I'm not too sure if you guys are familiar with the Thomas Young's double slit experiment. No? No, okay, I see your head shaking. Okay, but so his experiment, like before, like back in the day, like long time ago, like in the 1800s, people didn't know if light was a particle or a wave. So Thomas Young set out to figure it out with this experiment. So what he did was all he did was like pretty much turn his room into a giant pinhole camera with only one source of light coming out, and then he divided that source of light with a slip of card or a really thin card. And what he saw on the other side was a thing called an interference pattern, which is on what you see in the graphic on the right side. And what that essentially shows was just light interacting with itself, how waves interact. Like when you throw two stones into a pond, those waves interact, they cancel each other out, they build on top of each other. And you're just seeing the effects of light essentially reinforcing and destroying itself, the motion of light. So I wanted to figure out how to do that within a camera. So I made a camera from same rifle scope that I used in Earth at 907 miles per hour, but I used an instant camera. So I was able to get instant pictures of this action. And the other reason why I picked this camera too is because the camera was really long, and I had to kind of roughly measure everything correctly, like the size of Thomas Young's room, and shrink it down to a camera. So that's what I did. And what you see here is pretty much the early tests of it. So the image on the left, you're not seeing any wave patterns. You're actually just seeing the actual wavelength of light itself. Because at a certain moment, when you get close enough, you can't really use light as a mic, like to see up close, because then you just start actually seeing the wavelength of light dissipate, or it starts a mirage-ish. And then to the right is when you actually start seeing the wave, the interference pattern that we were talking about. So if you look in the center, there's like the main light source, or like the main place where all the light's being pummeled at. And then you start to look on the outside, and you start to see those interference patterns of light destroying and building up on each other. And the reason why you're seeing all these different colors is because light, they're all hitting each other, they're all interacting with each other at different angles. So you start to see the different colors of the rainbow from the visible light. So these exposures were like long, they were like 5 minutes long. And then this photograph right here was an hour long. I did not at first I did not know why it took so long. But then I started really research about like, what is it about living here, like atmospheric pressure and all that. That actually is a big deal, making these pictures. So, you know, here in Honolulu, it's, you know, there's a lot of humidity, there's a lot of atmosphere from the sun. So going back to when I did that photo at Mauna Kea, I also did these pictures at Mauna Kea also, because of the fact you're way above the atmosphere, there's no humidity or any like atmospheric distortion. So this is a little short video of me shooting it over there. Camera works pretty rudimentary. You know, I literally make everything from scavenged material, because photography could be expensive. So that was only 5 seconds. And the results were a lot more clear and a lot more prominent with these images. And that's just because of the intensity of the sun. It's a lot more direct when you're on the surface of Mauna Kea. So this is, I think, 5 seconds, 10, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You start to see how everything just starts to kind of get overwhelmed by all this light. And I like how everything gets away from the interference pattern and goes more towards a multi-directional thing going on here. So that's waves. And then, so we're going really different now. So I covered, you know, seeing the relationship of the earth and the sun. I just looked at light itself. And now I just wanted to focus on the sun. And this project called A Distant Star was, I tried to photograph the sun as if it was like a star, like thousands and thousands of light years away, like at the limits of our current technology. So the first thing I had to do was I went and I found a Game Boy camera, because of its really small like pixel size. So it kind of imitates, you know, being at the very limit of our technology. But one thing I learned was the sensor of the camera was really, really sensitive. So if I were to point directly at the sun, it was just going to blow everything out. So what I had to do was build sunglasses for the Game Boy camera. So what you're seeing is sunglasses made from a neutral density filter, which is, it pretty much polarizes visible light, and it blocks a lot of visible light. And also, I also added an infrared filter to block infrared light, and I also use an ultraviolet filter. So I'm just really cutting down the amount of light that's hitting that sensor. And I essentially just photographed the sun with this, like I used the Game Boy camera on a tripod. I pointed it at the sun, and then the Game Boy camera game only has 30, you can only shoot 30 photos. So I photographed 2 hours worth of the sun's movement with 30 photos. So it's in 4-minute increments, I make an exposure. And then I put it all together, and this is 2 hours worth of the sun's motion. Here you go. So what you're seeing when it blips out like that is the sun actually passed a cloud. So yeah, I would say the hardest part with this, with a distant star, was getting the files out of the Game Boy camera onto my computer. I had to deal with a lot of dead technology. So, and I had to figure out how to do that. So that was the hardest part, but it was fun. I had a fun time. So that was all within like since 2017. Now I'm actually working back at the slit scan technique, but I'm using it in a different way. I'm actually trying to build or make these two-dimensional, not two-dimensional. I'm trying to make these 2-second landscapes, vertical landscapes, because I've never done vertical landscapes before. So with the slit scan technique, if I was in motion, whereas the camera wasn't, I can actually make panoramic images, kind of like how the iPhone panorama works. So I'm using my slit scan kind of as a panoramic and seeing what I can build with that. And this is more of a formalist type of investigation, because I've never ever dealt with landscape photography. I mean, vertical landscape photography. So how do you compose everything? So it's more of an exercise on my end and my own timing on how do I render certain things, distorted or not. And I'm also making another camera. It's huge. It's really big. It's pretty much, it takes advantage of the rolling shutter effect. So what happens when something moves too fast for a video camera, it distorts. So I've been trying to deal with that and distort it even more and really take that rolling shutter effect like to the extreme. This is all I've been working on during quarantine. It's tough. A lot of robotics. That's a huge medium format camera to begin with. So imagine that box. It's massive. But yeah, once I'm done with that, I'll be putting up the photos of all of that on my Instagram and my website. And also there's some examples I've been messing with other cameras that deal with the rolling shutter effect. You know, this is just, you know, someone opened the door. So when you have a delay in the exposure, you can start coming up with real cool ideas of how to distort time and how to really, I really am interested in how can I make solid objects look malleable, you know? Because if you think about it in geologic time, the most solid like objects like mountains and all that, they are moving and they are essentially fluid. So I want to be able to explore that with common everyday solid objects. But yeah, that is my presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Atis Puampai.
Thank you.
We're gonna get, I believe Kelly is with us, if I'm not mistaken. Kelly, are you with us?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah, there she is. Yay. We're going to give Kelly Ciurej the opportunity to go ahead and do a presentation on her work. Stick around just to give everyone some, we are going to be doing a Q&A from questions and answers from the audience at the tail end of the talk. I'm going to chat with them after we do Kelly's presentation. So sit tight. This one's going to be a little bit of a longer one, but that's okay. This is good. This is all good and planned. So ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Ciurej.
All right. Let me just make sure. Okay. Hoping my screen is working now. Good. Okay. All right. So my name is Kelly Ciurej, and I'm an artist as well as an art instructor. Like Atis, me and Atis actually went to grad school together. We share an office, so we're familiar with each other's work. But I received my MFA from Mānoa in 2017. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my work and starting from grad school and then kind of moving towards more recent things that I've been working on. So like I said, I got my MFA from Mānoa in 2017, and I spent almost my entire 3 years of grad school exploring my family photographs and also working on self-portraits within the realm of photography mostly. Simply put, most of my time was spent throwing sticky stuff at myself or covering my face with it, and also my family photographs. So covering my precious family photographs in sticky goo. So essentially destroying them, this being an example. So I'll talk a little bit today about maybe why I was doing that, some of the influences that led me to this, how I formulated that work. So like I said, this work started in grad school around 2014, 2015-ish. And this work ended up being my thesis project. Photography was my main medium, and this work is titled Artificial Sweetener. So these pictures explore this concept that I call psychological stickiness. So basically I use certain materials, usually something really sticky like junk foods, cakes, candies, fruits, frosting, lots of cakes, lots of candy, and starting by using food as that initial subject. And then through that, I was kind of metaphorically exploring the stickiness of these certain spaces in my mind that I had internalized for most of my life and hadn't really explored before this period of time. So it's coming from my own family experiences. So using my own found family photographs just made sense in this context. So I took my family pictures and then I put the sticky stuff on them, and then I would scan them and they would become this new thing here. A lot of people look at this work, especially the self-portrait work that's involved in this series, and the first thing they ask me is, how did this whole throwing food at yourself thing start? Or they're very confused, or they're just not sure. And my truthful response for a really long time was kind of like, I actually don't know how this started. It just kind of, it formulated and I can't really remember. I have no idea why this happened, but the more I've been thinking about it lately, I've kind of come to a realization that it actually comes from a very specific place in time in my first semester of grad school. So the first month I came out to Hawaii for grad school, I called my mentor up after having a couple weeks in grad school. I was away from everyone I'd ever known and didn't know anyone here. And I called my mentor up. I was freaking out. I was like, I don't know what to make work about. What do I do? I'm going to fail out of school. I don't know what to make work about or how to go about this process. And he, instead of feeding into this little crisis, he snapped me out of it, as any great teacher does or great mentor does. And he told me to use this situation to my advantage. So make photos about this exact thing that I was feeling. So use this newness that I was coming into and this change and all this fear that I was feeling, and create work from it. So he kind of was like, okay, so you don't know anybody yet, use yourself, just be your own subject, make self-portraits. If you like to make portraits, make some self-portraits. Just see what happens, throw something at your face. It was kind of like this off-kiltered comment, and I tried it. He was like, maybe this will help you cope. Maybe this is something that you can work with. So I did it, and I took his advice. It hurt, it was messy, but something inside of me just kind of snapped and it clicked. And this was it for me. And this was what I needed to do to communicate artistically. So I really kind of just ran with that mindset for almost 3 years throughout grad school and continuing as well. This is some of the early stuff that I was working on around 2014. So it kind of started there in some ways, and I made work about this transition in my life from the place that I'm from in Chicago to the place that I was now in 2014 and currently too. So 5,000 miles away from everyone I've ever known, everything I've ever known. And so ever since, I've been kind of using this process in several different ways through many different projects to talk about different things, and mostly to create a story with photos that I felt that I couldn't do otherwise through words or through written language. This was a way that sort of made sense to me. It actually ended up working out much better for me in the long run to use myself in these portraits because I was always there. And I also felt a lot better chewing 75 pieces of bubble gum and sticking it to myself and taking photos for 45 minutes than doing it to one of my friends or somebody that I hired. I have done it, but it's easier to do it to myself because I think I have that ability to be flexible and suffer through it a little bit more. I feel less bad about it. But it also was much more personal work than I'd ever done before. So it just worked out that using myself made sense because I was telling my own story. So it became about identity and place and the self and all these other things. So going forward with artificial sweetener, I showed a few pictures from that series, but this is the installation view from my thesis show in 2017 at the Mānoa Art Gallery for artificial sweetener. Like I said, I work with self-portraits, and I was also using found family photos and recipes that belong to my mother and her mother and other women in my family. And so that's, so how it kind of started was during my second year of grad school, around 2015-ish, I went back to the south side of Chicago, which is where I'm from and born and raised. And I went back for a few weeks over the holidays, and I knew my thesis show was coming up. I knew I had to kind of narrow down the work that I was going to make and what I was going to talk about. So I started searching for topics or things that I could talk about through my photography. I knew I kind of wanted to make work about my childhood and my past family experiences, but I didn't necessarily know how. I hadn't talked about it verbally or been able to make other work about it yet. So I also was kind of afraid to start that and to kind of go down that black hole researching my personal history and thinking deeply about that. I think a lot of people kind of can relate to that. But I basically just started being nosy within my mom's house in the childhood home that I grew up in. I found a bunch of family photographs and a lot of memory boxes in there. My childhood, my siblings' childhood, they were all in these photographs that I found in the closet of my mom's house. So I also found a lot of my mother's recipes, which kind of spoke to her personality and what I thought of her as a person. She was really a baker. She is a baker. So there were tons of photos that I found, some I'd never seen before. Anything from photos of us in the backyard and a kiddie pool in the summer, holidays, birthdays. There were tons of birthday photographs, and those were the ones I ended up really being drawn to. So food and sweets and like sweet desserts is a really huge way of showing love in my family. So I think that drew me to those particular photographs. But I noticed a lot of these photographs sparked a memory in my mind about a birthday party or an activity or just a period of my life that just sparked things that I didn't necessarily want to remember, or maybe things I didn't remember at all. I also noticed more often than not that the photograph I was looking at was a false version of the past that I remember. So the standard poses that you have to use when you're standing with your birthday cake or during a celebration, or even the presence of certain people in these photographs, just didn't really add up to the memories that I had in my own mind. So a lot of the pictures I had a strong reaction to, I kind of just wanted to toss them aside or throw them away, not really think about them, which would be the easy thing to do, but a lot of artists are masochists. So instead of doing that, I took a stack of them back with me to grad school, and then I decided to make my thesis work about it and make photos of it. So in a lot of these family images, the sticky stuff is being used in really outrageous ways. Obviously, it's not a realistic portrayal of what might be there at the time in a garden with my mom and my sister, but I kind of compare this to the images of the birthday party that I would find, where you have these really standard poses. You have to look happy all the time. This is how we're going to remember this, by everyone smiling and having a good time. Everything's totally perfect and fun, and nothing is wrong, and that's just not how it usually goes. So I was really, and still am really, interested in this dialogue that surrounds rethinking photography as evidence, especially within family narration in particular, and how images can be used to recontextualize subject matter and sort of question the reality of past events. So I have a very repetitive, almost obsessive process to making these images. I use the sticky stuff to kind of obstruct my face or obstruct my family photographs. This is a screenshot of my camera roll, an in-progress shot from a few years ago. These are some more. I actually had an assistant in this shoot with me throwing sprinkles at my face. I usually am by myself, but I'd asked my friend Maura to come and bring me $1 sundaes from McDonald's. I needed ice cream, and I couldn't have it melt right away, so I had to set up the scene, and she brought the ice cream and then she threw sprinkles at me. So this was one of the most painful shoots that I had done, and I was surprised by that for whatever reason. I just didn't think the ice cream was gonna sting so much, but it really did. And this is the final image I chose from that series of images in that one shoot. So I kind of create these moments of discomfort and absurdity almost to record them with my camera, and kind of to study the way that our brain works to control and to respond to difficult emotions, particularly my brain and my own emotions. And I sort of do this as a way to experience a moment that's a little bit more true to a version of what I remember of these family connections and the really complicated way that we interact with each other. So for this project for Artificial Sweetener, I was combining several variations of images to work together. So I had found family photographs that were just kind of untouched, like this one, manipulated family photos, and then my performative studio photographs like that one, which act as self-portraits. So by photographing and kind of collaborating with these sticky foods throughout this process, I was really trying to visually understand and to respond to all that photographs, especially in my photographs, all that the photographs do not show in their original context. So what isn't there in the original image that I can add, maybe feel more true to my experience or my emotional response? So I use my present self in the adult version in these images as a way to talk about my psychological response to the family history that I'm looking into. And it's a very physical and kind of ironic sort of way. It's almost like a adult acting as a child would when they are upset or they're angry or they need attention or something like that. So it's kind of an irony in that sense. So this work was really a way for me to draw inspiration from the tensions that I was feeling from viewing family photographs, from looking back into my past, into my history, and then kind of editing that emotional truth and impeding on that photographic memory in some way. The sweetness is funny at first glance, at least I would like it to be. It becomes kind of sarcastic, but for me, it's this way to describe and to express this inescapable feeling of being stuck to a thought or to a feeling or to someone. that's present through the use of this excessive stuff. So the stuff that you can't get off the photo or the body, that you think about, that you can smell throughout the entire day. So it's kind of that metaphor.
Kelly? Shucks. I think we may have lost Kelly due to technology. Shout out Hawaii Internet, also known as Coconut Wireless. This is going to be kind of how this works for a minute, but once we get Kelly back, we would have kind of, I think she's catching it. Maybe this is internet buffering. Kelly, if you can hear us, I think we may have lost your audio.
You're muted, Kelly.
But you're muted. You got to mute yourself.
Am I back?
Yeah, now you're back.
Okay,
don't even worry. It happens all the time.
Okay. Did I put off on the slide?
Between the previous slide and this slide is where we lost you.
Okay. All right. So I'll talk about this one here. So basically I was just kind of saying there's definitely these areas of obsession or ritual and an underlying sense of trauma that's included in my work over the years, and especially within this series of images. So doing this process over and over again, trying to obtain different results, trying to understand things, that kind of continually occurs. But how we see and understand things is conditioned by our own experiences, definitely, and through time and awareness. So it's constantly evolving. So through these photographs, thinking about these photographs and thinking about these memories, I think can and likely will change as I continue to revisit this topic. So that was most of my grad school work. And then now I'll just talk briefly about a few current projects that I've been working on for the last couple years. This one being entitled Welcome to Paradise. So this project initially started and was inspired by a call for entry for the Contact exhibition in 2017 at the Honolulu Museum of Art School. So that show was titled Contact 3017. And I made this image for that show, and it just kind of took off for there for my inspiration. The prompt for that show was asking artists to consider what Hawaii might look like in a future tense. And so I started to think about that and just try to understand what that might actually look like, or what it might not look like. So how weird can I get with imagining all of the potential ups and downs of the future of this particular place? Oftentimes my thoughts and ideas are really abstract, so my photographs become pretty conceptual as well. This was another piece for a different Contact show. But a lot of this work in Welcome to Paradise kind of explores the cultural intersections that are unique to living in Hawaii specifically, whether that be dealing with the isolation of being 2,000 plus miles from the closest continental landmass, or the repercussions of environmental impacts, being a group of islands. What does that mean? What does that look like? Plastics, plastic, ocean pollution, ocean plastics in particular, plastic use, what does that mean? Stereotypical or touristic viewpoints of what Hawaii consists of, what it means to come to Hawaii, what it means to be here, you know, tourism. Temperature rising, global warming, things like that. There's so many things that are involved. But for this series, I just really mostly wanted to explore the gap between expectation and reality. So what the possible futures and also the impossible futures that could occur in this particular place. it's really also made me think about artificial and natural environments as well. What, you know, I think that's been present in a lot of my work, but really in this series, I've been thinking a lot more about it. You know, what's fake, what's natural, what's real, if that's even exists, if that even exists anymore. And now with COVID too, what that might look like. I actually took this photo over a year ago, and I had imagined this might be a storyline for something 100 years from now, or something like that. But I feel like it's totally changed the way I perceive scenarios and things that you just never really saw coming. She's missing a mask, but you kind of get the picture. This was taken a couple weeks ago in Waikiki. So that was Welcome to Paradise in a nutshell. And then I have a couple of other projects pulling from these ideas of artificiality and authenticity. What is authentic? So like I mentioned earlier, going back to the areas of the same dilemmas that have been constant in my work. And I think we all in some ways have these dilemmas, whether that be in art or relationships or work, or other aspects of our lives, you know, trying over and over again to understand these situations in different ways. These are just screenshots from another camera roll of a shoot I did several months ago. Continuous shooting on a self-timer, so I had 10 seconds until the timer releases. Recreating this idea, working towards a photograph that stands out to me, something that might speak to me and give me an idea. I usually shoot quickly and repetitively so that I can't think too much about what the outcome might be. And something maybe that would occur that I couldn't plan if I tried to. So that usually ends up being my most favorite photo shoots. I haven't quite figured out what I'm doing with this particular work yet. It's fairly new within the last few months, but again, going back to authenticity, what it means to be legitimate or original, what it is, you know, what is that gap between expectation and reality, or falsity versus truth, especially in an age of image oversaturation and the false lives that we can create online. So just to kind of wrap up, much of the value that I'm putting on in my work, or the value that I find in the work that I make, is involving pushing myself to an edge. So whether that be big or small, really pushing myself to go further, or to think deeper, or to branch outside of the box that I know and am familiar with. And I return to this process over and over again, even when I think I'm done and I think I can't do it anymore. But somehow I always end up back in this scenario. So stay tuned. If you have any baked goods you'd like to see in a future photo shoot, let me know. I can use them. That's it.
Baked goods that you don't mind getting destroyed eventually.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Ciurej. Big round of applause. It's interesting when we talk about photography, because we'll start here. Both of you have very glaring similarities and differences in your work. Atis, you went with your, not to sound like cliche, but your viewfinder focused externally. You went as far out from planet Earth as you could. With Kelly, you turned that same viewfinder directly as close as you could internally. Yet you both talked about the process by which you arrived to that image. Both of you going to extreme lengths, both physically, top of Mauna Kea, subjecting yourself to shoving ice cream in your face, to creating yourself as subject, and in that process get this image. Yet you both have viewfinders that are going opposite directions. Is there a point in either one of your artistic endeavors where you kind of go, okay, this is too much? Like, I've literally gone too far with this idea and I need to pull up because I've gone as far as I could go. is there that point? Do you ever have that insecurity of like, this is too much? I can't take another photo for 2 hours, the same photo for 2 hours. I can't shove another cake in my face. Does that exist for you in your process?
Go ahead, Kelly. This is more on your end, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, Kelly, not to interrupt, but Atis, even for you, like at some point, you got to stop creating your own cameras. You know, like, so it's for both of you. I think it's got to be for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely been times that I've like done a photo shoot, or I thought it was going to go a different way. And usually it's when I'm already in it that I'm like, why am I doing this again? And then for whatever reason, it's like I forget that. It's like if I go a week, I'm like, okay, it wasn't so bad. And then you do it again and you're like, oh, wait, yes, it is. So it's kind of this reoccurring, but there's also like a catharsis in it for me at least. It feels really weird and it feels bad sometimes, but I feel like it's also helping me get to the next point, or it's helping me understand something else.
Yeah. For me, I guess for like the whole going back to the camera building thing, it's like I only make something if there's nothing around, like if I can't do it with a conventional camera, then yeah, I have to build it myself. But yeah, I guess going to pushing the limits, I guess it's just within my own physical limit. You know, obviously I can't do a solar track for like a full day or two, you know. But like, you know, these long ones they're pretty intense, like just staying there and then looking directly at the sun, like that hurts. Like,
oh, I mean,
like the first time I started to do the earth at night, like the first time I started doing pictures where I had to stare directly at the sun, I almost threw up, because even though I closed one eye, the sun was so bright and it's like hitting my other eye that was closed, and it was heating up my face pretty bad. So I ended up wearing an eye patch, which looked really hilarious. But I think for me it's more about just physical limitations, conceptually too. Like so far I've gone to the wavelength of light itself. And then now, like from that to, I guess, like seeing things, trying to be as far away from the sun as possible, like doing the whole distant star thing. So I'm always trying to figure like what's the next limit we can go, you know. But right now, especially with quarantine, I'm really just kind of going more towards Kelly's side, like the psychological side, you know. But I'm exploring it, of course, in a different way. I think for Kelly, like I always see like a lot of, it's almost like surreal documentary, you know, because you're actually using the materials within the image. For me, it's just, I'm really just trying to elevate the most really like simple basic things and see what other people can put into it, you know. So that's what I'm trying to think about right now. And of course, just like watching what's the newest science stuff going on. You know, that black hole image, man, like that's
basically
something.
I think for both of you, at least in my exposure to it, both of you take these ideas and just take them to the furthest logical extension, whether it be as simple as light, whether it be as simple as how a memory can deteriorate and how that memory can be manipulated. Both of you conceptually take that and put it on your back and say, okay, where does this go, and how surreal can I make light look, or how natural can I make a birthday party gone completely awry look? So I think for me, I see the similarities in your work, and it feels like this great logical sort of endpoint of how far can I just take this? Before we continue, I'd be rather remiss, in the time that we have left, I wanted to open up to our audience. If you have any questions, to go ahead and message us. I'll do my best to ask both Kelly and Atis about them. We'll go ahead and start sending them in so we can get a pipeline for that, and we'll continue this particular discussion. I wanted to switch hats a little bit I know we've talked about your work, but both as educators now in transitioning to communicating photography to students, and how do you effectively communicate that? Because, not to date myself, but I came up as the advent of cellular technology kind of came up. So having a camera in my pocket, I can remember a portion of my life. I can remember a portion of my life. It happens. It's all good. I remember a portion in my life where I didn't carry a camera in my pocket. You know, I remember, and all of a sudden we were, and now it's getting to the point where these cameras that are very small on our phones can rival $1,000 camera point and shoot that I can get on the market. And now for the kids that are coming up in education, like learning how to do photography, and have things like Instagram as, and the self-documentation and filters being a part of their daily lives. How do you kind of de-learn that, break that down in your students? How do you build upon that? How do you reteach photography to people that have had it as part of their lives for all of their life?
She started teaching before me, so I want to hear what she has to say first.
Of course.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, well, a lot of the time, because teaching photo, at least I think it's a really positive that both Windward and UH start teaching film photography. So you're teaching black and white, you're teaching film, and most students, if not all, have never ever used a film camera and have always had the ability to shoot in color. So taking the color aspect away and also taking the aspect away that you can't see your results right away is a really, I think watching students understand that, and then the trial and error part is a really great way to see like how they can take it in a different way. Because you see, I mean, the ones, even the students who are failing, who take their roll of film and it's blank and they develop it and there's nothing happening, the ones who are determined really want to see the results, and you can see the way that they think about photography changing throughout the semester, which I think is a great aspect to that. And there's a lot more patience that goes into it, because like I said, you can't look at your phone right away and see what you took and then just delete it if you don't like it. You know, it's there on film. So whether or not they use that in their daily life after the class, who knows? But I think there's a lot more precision that goes into like what you're looking at and how to photograph it in a way that you want to photograph it. Because you have 36 exposures and you want them to be right. You want them to look good. So, you know, it's a more thoughtful process.
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm I'm kind of thinking the same thing too. It's like you're bringing them back down, like you're making them learn how to crawl again, you know, and then it's almost like you're, like what I tell them, it's like you're in constant flux with the world. And whereas a painter, you know how painters, like you start with a blank canvas and then it's an additive approach to image making. So you're starting from something completely clear, or like there's nothing there, and then you're adding into it. I think with photography, it's the opposite. Like you're starting with chaos, like this, just everything. You have infinity around you. How do you like break it down to something that we can understand? You know, and I think once I tell them that, they're starting to kind of get the idea. Okay, it's more of a reductionist idea at certain times. You know, how do you get key elements in? How do you leave stuff that, you know, could potentially confuse someone? How do you leave that out? And at certain times, students are like, man, you're so particular, dude. Like, why? Like, you say it's like a little bit to the right, to the left, or why? Like, you're dogging on me because I have like a tap out like logo, like a person wearing a tap out logo. You know, like, why are you asking me like, why is he wearing a tap out shirt and stuff like that? And I'm just like, you know, like, you know, all these are symbols. I always try to like tell them that you're trying to be the most clearest visual communicator, you know, without words. You know, how do you do that photographically? So every single thing you put in there, it's gonna matter, even like the angle, the perspective. So I think that would make them start to really, it makes them more conscious about what they're shooting. And then like, yeah, going back to like, you only have 36 exposures, it just really reinforces that, you know. And then I think like me and Kelly, we use similar projects, you know. So, you know, first project, we just start like, we're not even thinking about subject matter or message or like any type of narrative or anything. We're just thinking about how do you make this rectangle we have, how do you utilize it to the full potential? And then after that, it's like, how do you insert imagery or meaning into it? And then how you do that with people. And then you can really start to mess with the rules or those ideas of how do you visually communicate something with a still image, you know?
Is there, I asked this question in an email, and it was something, I'm going to butcher her name. Is it Dorothea or Dorothy? Dorothea Lang? Or is it Dorothy or Dorothy?
Dorothea.
Dorothea. She said that all images should be fortified by words, and that having those words, having that concept, having that discussion allows you to understand what you're trying to communicate in that photo. Is a part of me understands that. You know, if I were to just walk into like a photo of Atis of him documenting light as it passes, it looks like a photo wrong. It looks like something
Yeah.
broke. You know, or if I looked at Kelly's photo of her family that she took from her childhood, like actual family photos from her house, it just looked like it fell on the ground, picture down and gum, and she pulled it up. And that's not a slight on either one of your work, but conceptually, in order to understand what you're communicating, I need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. So for you as educators and as photographers, do you feel you need those words to fortify the work, or can the work just exist independent of those words, or do they need them at all?
Atis, you got this one.
All right. I think it depends. It's because art is infinite. You know, you can do whatever you want with it. And, you know, if you were to bring up a photo that everyone knows based off of like current events right now, like you don't need words. Like you don't need it at all. But like if you were to do something else, if you're trying to bring in a new idea, you probably might need words. Especially something that could be alien or foreign. Like I show my students the Arecibo message. Like how is an alien supposed to like decipher like, oh, this is planet Earth, there's humans here? Like how did the artists like Carl Sagan and Trevor Paglen, like how did they bring up these simple messages? Like how do you universally communicate something, you know? So I feel like we have the luxury with words, you know, in America, so we can just use the words. That's kind of an easy way to do it. But I always try to tell students, or I tell myself, like, how do you not have to? I think that's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a compromise if you do use the words or not. It's just, I think if you don't need it, then it's like, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's especially as time goes on, it's more contemporary to expect words to go with pictures, especially captions like on social media and stuff. But yeah, I kind of ask my students that too. Like if someone were to see this photo 100 years from now, 200 years from now, without any words, or language was different in 1,000 years or whatever it is, what would you want to portray in that visual language? So I think, because I'm guilty of that too. If I go to a museum, I usually look at the artist statement first, which some artists would disagree, but I like to see what the artist has to say and then make my own opinion. But what can you do? I think photographs should also have the ability to stand alone if they need to, and it shouldn't have to be both or nothing. It can be a photograph with your own interpretation.
Yeah.
I think the next question, this one comes from the audience, to change wildly the topic. For you guys, what are the artists or photographers that influence your work the most? And outside of that, like what are influences your work the most? You know, within the art world, within photography, and then outside of that.
There you go, Kelly. I went first. Now you go first. Let's switch.
I'm going to say your name. It's easy. You're going to have to go first.
Okay, yeah. How about you?
Just stare down. Me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Cindy Sherman has always been one of my biggest influences since undergrad. Just in terms of, first of all, self-portrait, but also kind of the way she almost disassociates from using herself. Like, she never refers to her portraits as her. It's always this character. It's always something else. So I really have always loved her work. Sally Mann is another one. We don't have, our work is nothing like each other's, but I think her work is just so beautiful and great. In terms of other influences outside of photographers, I would say most of my influences comes from either my childhood or my personal experiences, like really emotionally charged photographs. I think like I can use my emotions in a photograph much more so than I can kind of like express it in other ways. So that tends to guide me. Also helps to sort of alleviate that. It's a language for me. It's like I have these emotional, I have an emotion or I have this experience, and then how can I express it in a way that's like a little bit more abstract than writing it down or writing the very specifics of it and make a picture about it.
Okay, right, my turn. Okay. I would say one photographer that I really like is Hiroshi Sugimoto. He's a conceptual photographer in New York. All of his work are really conceptually driven, and usually the end result is something really minimalistic almost. And I really enjoy just that, how he's really bringing in the sublime and how so much chaos can boil down into something that's so simple. That's what I like personally. I don't think I'm ever gonna be like him, but I like that idea. And photography, other photographers, I really like science images. Yeah, going back to that black hole image, like that's my wallpaper on my laptop. And people are like, man, what? But yeah, like as far as photography, but outside influences, I think it's just I've always been kind of like a person that's always moving. So I'm a drummer also, so I think me always interested with time and all that is probably because of me. I play the drums, so yeah, I think that's me. Just everything I do, like me skating, just everything around me, it's always just like, what can I do to apply this with my photography? Because I don't really have much resources, so I've always like, what do I got on hand, So that's pretty much what I do.
It's always been very much of a DIY sort of
ethos. Yeah, for sure.
This may sound like a very esoteric like photography question, but whenever we get a NASA image and it says like the Hubble Space Telescope, like the Hubble Space Telescope didn't frame that photo. Like, who framed that photo? Like, was it just someone said point at these axes and start shooting and best image? Like, there's got to be a human there, and who's that human that directs?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's like it's such a. It's a stock photo, I know, and NASA and Hubble is there, but it's like, who's the person that directed that photo? Like, who did that work? Because it's not the telescope, it's not alive. Sorry, esoteric thoughts.
No, that's cool.
Is there, for you as photographers, is there ethics of taking a photo? Is there ethical considerations when you're out shooting? You know, I think we live in a world where I can pick up my phone and everyone can be documented in public, but is there an ethical consideration for you that you think about that people don't think about when they're out shooting or when you're shooting? What's that thing that, or that rub that always pops in your mind when you're shooting where you're just like, oh, that's something I have to deal with when I go and click the shutter?
Okay. I like going back to the ethics with photography. I feel like that quote, like the camera is supposed to be an extension of your body. So I think it's just totally different from every other person, you know. If you like, if there's a guy that's like kind of like Tom Green or something, of course he's gonna take pictures that's always gonna be pushing people's buttons, you know. So for me, my personality is like, you know, I kind of keep to myself. So whatever I do, it's just, yes, it is what it is for me with whenever I hold the camera. Yeah, I feel like that's what makes photography awesome, is because everyone has it, you know, and wherever they point to, that's, and whatever they, it's not so much as them taking the pictures, sometimes it's whatever they actually want to show. It's like, I think that's where it's like, okay, why are you showing me this, you know? I think that's where it gets more interesting, and that's when you start to really get a conversation with them and really get to know them as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends totally on context and what you're taking pictures of and making pictures of. I think it's easy, especially now, to, you know, take a picture and think of your subject as just a subject instead of a human, or with someone with a story, or, you know, something else to consider besides just that photograph you took. So, I mean, I'm not a documentary photographer, but I think it's an important, it's definitely something you need to consider in the context of what you're making. So, because we all have the ability to take photographs, everyone has a camera. So, I think always considering like what your moral obligation is to that photograph, and seeing the other side of that story and that situation is really important. I think it's almost more important now because everyone has the ability to take these pictures, and it's almost less relevant because people don't consider it as often as they should, because it's just like, okay, I'm taking this picture, I want the likes or whatever it is, and they don't consider that alternative story.
I guess the elephant in the room, and Atis mentioned it a bit, and so did you, Kelly, is that with COVID and quarantine impacting all of us, how did it impact your process of work? How did it impact your inspiration to make work? We'll go with Kelly. Start.
Yeah, to be honest, it's affected it greatly. I mean, it's hard because you have access to everything. You have access to social media and whatever everyone's up to, everyone you've ever met and people you've never met. So feeling that pressure with this, you know, time, this excess amount of time to create the best thing that you've ever created, I felt was a really big pressure. So I felt almost this lack of inspiration, because I'm like, well, I don't know what the greatest thing I'm going to create is. And, you know, how do I navigate this? Even though most of my photos come from taking pictures in my apartment and using a backdrop, it was kind of like, well, what is next? So, you know, what is this? What am I making photographs for? What, you know, like, what does the world look like in 2 months? So I'm trying to get better at just continuing to like make my own work regardless of that mindset of like, well, everything's uncertain, but it's mentally, emotionally, that's a positive for you to continue with this, and who knows what the result might be. So just to continue to try and like push myself to those boundaries that I try to push to. It's not easy though.
Yeah, I think for me, it's my how I work's been the same. You know, I've always been a guy that, yeah, DIY, like limited resources. So now my resources are even more limited, you know, so it's just another challenge, but I've always really enjoyed that challenge. Yeah, I'm still getting science news. I'm still, you know, just exploring like philosophical things, but yeah, I think now with like the quarantine, it's not really, yeah, it's not a big deal. I'm trying not to get that into my work too much, especially like my students, like me and Kelly, we both had classes where we had to transition from in-person to online.
Mhm.
And then the subject matters of our students, I don't know about Kelly's, probably hers too. Is it like the subject matter changed to just COVID? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that was fun. Like as an educator, the COVID situation did it. It was a good exercise to have students talk about it without being too like, oh, I'm wearing a mask.
Mm.
This makes a good COVID picture. Like how do you go beyond just using visual cues of what COVID is into making it into a real impactful picture, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought that it helped students kind of cope a little bit because it was the beginning. So it was like no one knew what to do, so it gave them a little bit of something to do. So it's like, here, do this assignment and think about like how this is actually impacting your life.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting. I've done a few of these, and many artists have said the same thing, that there's this duality of very much understanding how it's impacted their daily life, but also as artists, it has given them this really great excuse to just stay home and work. You know, you don't have to say, "Oh no, I'm good. I'm not." You know, there's no excuses now. I can stay home if I want to, and I'm doing what I need to do with my own work. So,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting. All artists have, I think, this moment of, you know, it impacted me, but I've done a lot of work. I don't have to make excuses for doing it. So it's a silver lining to that. For the both of you, if people wanted to follow up more on your work, to contact you to see, you know, what you're doing, where can they find your work on the internet? Kelly, please.
My Instagram is Kelly Ciurej Photo, Ciurej. For those of you who can't automatically just spell that correctly. And then my website is kellyciurej.com.
Awesome. Atis?
Yeah, I also have a weird last name too. Yeah, so my
I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. No, like my website is, yeah, my name.com, atispuampai.com. My Instagram is exceptionally.flat. But that's like a personal Instagram. So you're gonna see me. It's just everything: skating, drumming, my work. I'm actually gonna try and make an Instagram just for my work. I had a problem where I spoke at a photographic convention, and then I put my Instagram out there. Yeah, like a bunch of people followed me, and then once they realized that it's not just my work, a lot of them just like, well, what is this? And they all unfollowed me. So I should make a professional Instagram account. Yeah. Yeah, but going to the other one, Manana_rats_time_capsule. That's like my work, like right when I learned how to take photography. So that's something to see, you know.
And this is just a addition. I learned about photography from skate photography. Like that was my first introduction to that. So that is very near and dear to my heart. So I get it.
Okay, cool.
Atis Puampai, Kelly Ciurej, thank you so much for joining us here on Pau Hana Talk. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to see your work, and also for sharing what drives you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause wherever you are for Atis and for Kelly.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you're safe. Follow, of course, Kelly and Atis, and also you can follow the Hawaii State Art Museum for more information about upcoming Pau Hana events. Thank you so much. Please be safe, be kind, and be amazing to each other. Have a great night.